Kalispera. Kalispera. Kalispera, Kyrios και Kyrie. Αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, φίλοι και φοιτητές. Είμαι η Βάνα Βέσκο, Διευθύντρια της Αμερικανικής Σχολής Κλασικών Σπουδών στην Αθήνα. Είναι χαρά μου που σας καλωσορίζω εδώ απόψε για τα γιορτάσουμε τα εγγένεια της έκθεσης Vrysaki, η αναβίωση μιας γειτονιάς. Η πτέρυγα μακριάνη της Αμερικανικής Σχολής είναι ένας χώρος που μπορούμε να συναντηθούμε για να ερευνήσουμε ιδέες που είναι κεντρικές για την κατανόηση του ελληνικού κόσμου. Ιδέες που αντλούν ή εμπνέονται από τις συλλογές και την έρευνα της Αμερικανικής Σχολής. Η έκθεση Vrysaki είναι ακριβώς ένα τέτοιο έργο. Το 1929 η Αμερικανική Σχολή πήρε άδεια και το 1931 ξεκίνησε ανασκαφές στην γειτονιά του Vrysaki, βορρά της Ακρόπολης, αναζητώντας την αρχαία αγορά της κλασικής Αθήνας. Μία γειτονιά θυσιάστηκε για την ανακάλυψη μιας άλλης. Η έκθεση αυτή τιμά η γειτονιά του Βρυσακίου και τους κατοίκους της. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, friends, and students. I am Vana Westco, Director of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens, and it is a pleasure to welcome you here this evening to celebrate the opening of the exhibition Vrysaki, The Revival of a Neighborhood. The Makrianis wing of the American School offers a place where we can come together to explore ideas that are central to understanding the Greek world, ideas which draw on or are inspired by the collections and research of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. The exhibition Vrysaki is just such a project. In 1929, the American School was granted permission, and in 1931 began excavations in the neighborhood of Vrysaki, to the north of the Acropolis, in search of the ancient Agora of classical Athens. One neighborhood was sacrificed for the discovery of another. This exhibition honors the lost neighborhood of Vrysaki and its inhabitants, as revived from archival records, excavation strategies, and the artifacts themselves. I would like to thank the curator of the exhibition, Sylvie Dumont, Registrar Emerita of the Athenian Agora, for first writing a wonderful book, Vrysaki, A Neighborhood Lost in Search of the Athenian Agora, and now bringing to life that same neighborhood in the galleries of the Makrianis wing. An exhibition is always a team effort, and I'd like to thank the staff of the Agora and the director, John Papadopoulos, for his efforts in supporting this exhibition, the staff of the American School for providing their support across all divisions, and the team of Mikri Arktos for yet another beautiful installation. We also want to recognize our dedicated neighbors in Plaka, the McCabe family. And I also want to thank our co-sponsors of the exhibition, Eurobank and Zoe Sarbanes-Pappas, for their generous support. I now turn to Sylvie Dumont, who will introduce the exhibition and this evening's keynote speaker, Professor Kostis Kourelis of Franklin and Marshall College. Sylvie.
We have to tell me what to do here with Konstantina. Sorry, where do I press to do the slide? Sorry.
What would you like? You want
To put the next slides, what do I do?
Just press right here.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, it's my first time, so I have to be patient. So, okay, here, thank you. Thank you. I think I'll be okay. Good evening, Kalispera. I would like to express my gratitude to Bona Westcott for making this event possible, and to John Papadopoulos, the director of the Agora, who proposed the creation of this exhibition and supported it until the end. I'm grateful to the McCabe family, especially Robert McCabe, and especially for the many years they have supported me and the Athenian Agora. And a special thanks for their generosity to Eurobank and Mrs. Zoe Zarbanes Papas for sponsoring this event. You hear me well, I guess? Yes. I always want to thank personally Mark Lowell, chair of the managing committee, and Georgia Fanakos, the executive director of the school, for their encouragement, and John Camp for always being there for guidance. I'm also extremely grateful to all the staff of the American School and the Agora for their invaluable support, as well as to the scholars who have offered their help. And fortunately, there are many individuals I would like to thank personally, but their names are duly included in the exhibition, and if I forgot somebody, please accept my apology. I'm deeply grateful to all of them for their willingness to share their knowledge and provide help and advice unconditionally during this past month. Η έκθεση αυτή δεν θα ήταν δυνατή χωρίς την υποστήριξη του Υπουργείου Πολιτισμού, Εφορία Αρχαιολογικών Πόλης Αθηνών και ιδιαίτερα των αρχαιολόγων της Αγοράς, κ. Τσογά και Μαρία Διάσκα. Θέλω να τους ευχαριστήσω θερμά για την πολύτιμη υποστήριξή τους. This exhibition would not have been possible without the support of the Ministry of Culture, Authority of Antiquity of the City of Athens, and especially the archaeologists of the Agora, Clio Tsoga and Maria Liaska. I want to thank them warmly for their support. And last and not the least, many thanks to Vivi, Gerolymatou, and Andreas Georgiadis for their creativity and enthusiasm in designing this show, and to their technical team, Dani, Stavros, and Stratos. And thank you for coming tonight for the opening of the exhibition dedicated to the Vrysaki neighborhood. First, I would like to explain that I have chosen the name Vrysaki for the publication of my book to simplify the discussion, and consequently the name was kept for the exhibition. But this is not a statement. Sorry. As you see on the screen, many other names are known for this neighborhood, like Acropoleos, Atalou, Areopago. The most common name is Vlasaru, which was the name of one of the 5 parish churches in the neighborhood, which can also be found with different spelling, like you see, Vlastaru, Vlastara. Additionally, modern writers often merge it with nearby neighborhoods like Plaka or Tission, especially since Vrysaki had since disappeared, like you see on this edition of 1991 from Yannis Simonetis that describes his life as a child in Vrysaki that he recalls as Tission. But let's start with the location of the area. Here's a map of Athens in 1826, before its liberation, and the establishment of the Kingdom of Greece. The city was then encircled by a fortification wall called Haseki. To help orient yourself, to help orient yourself, we can follow the red triangle drawn on this map, located at the intersection of the 2 main streets in Vrysaki. Sorry. Put this somewhere. Okay. So you see I'm trying to find the laser. Where can I find the laser? I think I found it. Laser pointer. here. See it? Got it, I think. Sorry. So here I can point there or on the screen. But people online cannot see it, I think, right? Anyway, for the people here, here we go. Here. So you see the triangle here? Okay. You can follow the triangle on this map located in the intersection of two main streets in Vrysaki, Areopago on the right and Eponymon on the left. This triangle is located in the center of the neighborhood of Vrysaki and is visible on maps of the 19th and 20th century. It serves as a useful reference point for locating your position and understanding the scale of the area. And here, an earlier map of Athens, possibly copied from Fauvel by an engineer named Gubo, and dated around 1799, that you will see in the exhibition. This map shows the same layout of the street, and here again you can see the apex of the triangle. Let's see here. See, I think for people on the screen, you see. Okay. With the decision of Athens being chosen as a new capital, the Greek and the European academic world was very involved in the reconstruction of the city and the preservation of its ancient monument. Many city plans were drawn, but a common feature was the creation of an archaeological zone aimed at revealing the ancient city remains in its monument, as the Festion, the Stoa of Attalos, and the Tower of the Wind, to mention only a few. This is to illustrate that the fate of the neighborhood was already sealed in the 19th century. The plan of the two young architects, Cleanthes and Schubert, slightly altered by Leo von Klenze, was adopted in 1834 and established the basic urban core of Athens and the future center of the new city north of the Acropolis. Leon von Klenze was the court architect of Ludwig I, king of Bavaria, who was the father of Otto, the first king of Greece. It was actually Ludwig I who instigated the urban transformation of Athens and suggested that Athens be the royal seat of Greece. And here we have a plan, the plan of Cleanthes and Schubert. In red, in circle, you have the excavation. In red, the area designated for excavation by Cleanthes and Schubert. It represents a little less than 1/3 of the original city. The new street layout partially overlays the old city. In blue, you can see the limit of the old town. And above, where is located the new city streets are located mostly outside the fortification walls. And you have ammonia at the top here to give you an idea of the scale, what we're looking for. And here again, you see this triangle, again, to help you. The excavation plan of Cleanthes of Schubert was never carried on, but during the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, many attempts, many proposals were made to recover the ancient city remains. Some excavations were executed by the Greek Archaeological Society in Athens and the German Institute in Athens, until the rights were given to the American school to excavate part of this area still densely inhabited. The negotiation between the Greek government and the American school commenced in 1924 and results in the formulation of a law known as Law 4212 in July 1929. The negotiation process is not the aim of this exhibition, but how the archival material gathered through the logistic of this immense operation provide us today the opportunity to reconstruct an entire neighborhood that disappeared almost a century ago. The goal is to transport you back in time and guide you through the street of Vrysaki, allowing you to experience its various transformations from the Ottoman Empire to the present day. Upon entering the exhibition hall and starting from the left, you will discover the neighborhood as it appeared during the Ottoman period, featuring a panorama of Athens by Eduardo Duell, date 1805, and a painting by Louis Dupré, dated 1819, date 1819, sorry. According to studies by Yanis Stavlos and Luigi Beschi, and based on that painting, the Vice Consulate, Jean-François Fauvel, constructed a mansion in Vrysaki at the corner of Ptolemeu and Areopagus Street to house his extensive collection of antiquity, which had become too large to fit in a house he was living in close to the Roman Agora on Piccadilly Street. And here we have a possible reconstruction of the mansion with the entrance on Ptolemeu at the bottom. It was destroyed during the Revolution around 1825. And here you have in gray the plan of the house by Travlos, and in orange you have the houses, the modern houses that were built in the 19th century later and expropriated in 1934 by the American School. His residence in Vrysaki became known as the first museum of Athens. An heteroclite collection of objects, mostly shirts, were discovered at the location of his mansion and are believed, because of their odd context, to be part of his collection abandoned when he departed from Greece. So how was the neighborhood at the beginning of the 20th century? The Stoa of Attalos had been excavated up to the ground floor level. Here you have the north side. Here you have the south side. With the four, you see the three entrances of the rooms, the shops. The giants were uncovered and put on pedestals, both excavated by the Archaeological Society in Athens. The site where the city Lepsinion would be discovered had been excavated first by Pitakis in 1851 and later by Kourouniotis in 1910, as you see on this slide. Between 1895 and 1896, William Dortfeld, director of the German Archaeological Institute, conducted small-scale excavation at the foot of the Hephaestion Temple. The Archaeological Society of Athens bought more house in 1903 to continue excavation on a larger scale in 1907 and 1908. So here's a color map. Good. So, date 1901, a recent gift by the archaeologist Yorgos Papatanasopoulos to Jack Davis, former director of the school, who donated to the archive. This precious map corroborates the fact that there were expropriation at this precise location during that period. At the bottom left, the name of the owners and their lots are indicated in color code. You see the lot and the numbers, and you have the name here. You see the Archaeological Society on top, and the name of the other owners. Sorry. And you can, sorry, yes, you can go back here. You see the triangle again, I was telling you. Yes. Okay. And here we have a map of 1936 based on the creation, after the creation of the cadastre in 1927, with the insertion of the missing house. It was a missing puzzle for me because this section on the map we had in the Agora was only indicated with the letters Omicron Epsilon, which basically meant old excavation. So I'm glad the video worked. You see, it was just like the missing section. And here we have a digital map. The digital map was created in 2019 based on all the analog maps that we had, and representing in green all the houses that have been expropriated by the American School until then. As I have mentioned before, the negotiation with the American School began in 1924, and here a very interesting map, a handmade two-sheet plan signed by Apostolos Arvanitopoulos, F4 of Antiquities, and dated January 1925, listing each house, their condition, and the value of each house. A map obviously created for the purpose of offering the American school the area for investigation. And you can see again the, oops, no, that's not. The triangle, you can see again here, the story of the giant. I think I want to show here. Okay. Here you have the north side, and here you have the south side of the map. What is interesting are the additional remarks of the minister. After some complicated calculation, he writes, "The basic price above is fair. It is impossible that the owners will not be very pleased, despite the fact that they have to leave their properties." But this list does not only describe each dwelling, it also reports the general condition of the neighborhood. Above his signature, the minister wrote, "The area is densely populated with low-income people, narrow lanes, all filthy and unsanitary, and even if there were no archaeological purposes, the house would have to be demolished for the health of the city." Not good for the neighborhood. Following this chronological introduction, the main section of the exhibit seeks to immerse you into the neighborhood as it existed, allowing you to experience the living condition between the two world wars. So here is a view of when you enter the Agora today from Adriano Street. And here what you have seen in 1931. This is the apex of the triangles I was telling you about before. It's the two streets, Eponymon and Areopago. As you will enter the center of the hall of the exhibition, you will be facing this large building located at the apex of our right triangle, leading you to the tree street I mentioned before. In the core of the room, you will walk along the street of Vrysaki, which is parishes, square, different workshop, coffee shop, wine shop, restaurant, and the three cinemas. You will also enter the refugee settlement that was located close to the Titian Square, where was living 66 families until they were displaced in 1936. I mentioned the parish of Lazaro before, and you will have the opportunity to see the actual wall painting of the Virgin of Lazaro that was detached in 1935 from the top of the main door and kept in a collection of the Agora. For the exhibition, it was decided to restore the painting, and what a surprise when the conservator Yorgos Mastroiannis lifted the plaster and found a sheet of iron covered in what seemed to be colored figures. After treatment, another icon was revealed, but because it was found later, we won't be able to present it today. However, it recently passed through the Archaeological Council and will be exhibited later this summer. You will have to come back and see it. I want to thank Mrs. Constantina Karayani from the Exhibit Department of the Ministry of Culture, who has made this possible. So here we have the icon as detached, and here it's after its restoration. And here, just to keep you in suspense, it's the icon before treatment. So you will have to come back. I haven't seen it myself, so it will be a surprise for me too. You will probably wonder, now we come to the star of the exhibition, you will probably wonder why there are metal tins in the exhibition. Apart from the photographic material, I wanted to enrich the exhibition with some contemporary objects from the 30s, found in the actual neighborhood during the excavation. However, I can imagine that these objects were considered too modern at the time, and thus not many were catalogued, and some of them are exhibited here. So I had to find some solution, and one summer, Susan Rotroff and Kathleen Lynch suggested I look at the tins in the depot. They are from the 30s, aren't they? Since the beginning of the excavation, archaeologists have used tins to store what is called pottery context, meaning sherds that are not to be catalogued individually. We are talking about thousands of sherds and a few thousand tins. To give you an idea, here we have Mr. Andreas Mavroganis, who is sorting, to give you an idea of the amount of pottery that they were finding. And you can see on the floor, somewhere here, some tins and wooden boxes that were used for storing. And here, again, you see the boxes and the tins. You see tins everywhere. And here we have moving tins, man-moving tins from the old storage to the store of Athens in 1955 after its construction. You can see the wooden label. Oops, sorry. No. This was the... So you see the wooden label here, Fee 75, identifying the section. So tins are still in use today for the same purpose, as you can see here. I spoiled the surprise. So here you see Vita Zita, which is where it's still excavating today. When Costi Kourelis talked to me about this project on petroleum and the first asphalt road, I noticed that the older tins were all for petroleum. Who in Greece hasn't seen a tin used as a flower pot or workman or by a workman in construction? Tins are everywhere, even today. And here they are in a shop. This is a shop in my neighborhood, and this is the first tin they bought for their business, and they kept them as a souvenir. And here in Plaka, last December, 2 tins full of tar, which bring us back to Kosti's lecture. So where are they coming from, those tins in the 30s? Where was the donor Rockefeller Jr., whose father was a founder of Standard Oil, connected to this equipment? Were they sold by ironmongers? Were they so common in use for petrol lamps that you would always have a tin in your yard? Kostis Kourelis will try to answer all those enigmas for us. But the tins represent also the poverty and the difficulties of water supply. Water was a major problem in those days, and with the arrival of refugees, only 10 liters of water per person were permitted until the Marathon Dam was built in 1931, and the capacity increased to 80 liters per day per resident. For your information, one of those tin can hold 17 liters of liquid, and today the average water consumption per person per day in developed countries is 150 liters. We're talking about washing machine and showers, of course. Not surprisingly, the movie The Apache of Athens was filmed in the street of Vrysaki in 1930. It was most likely chosen because the filmmaker wanted to depict the protagonist as indigent, and Vrysaki was, it seemed, one of the poorest area in the center of Athens. And here you have the street Ptolemeu, a street with dilapidated dwellings that is shown a few times in the movie. And here, an extraordinary scene of the refugee camp by the Tiseon with a lady boiling something in a tin. It's a bit ironic, but the demolition of the house also allows us to understand different construction methods of the 19th century. One other happy encounter was with Mikri Arktos, who had produced a typology of bricks. Bricks are often stamped with a manufacturer name and give us unusual information for industrial archaeology. Here you have the name Lavenzakis. Here we have Thixi or Xithi. It was not identified yet. And another example, Kapami. And here you have piles of bricks. After a bid, contractors that were demolishing the house in excavation were given the right to sell the material. So you have here all the bricks that they gather. Shutters called German style, with an extra aperture at the bottom, are still rare to find today. The German style shutters were not so popular after 1880 because by being on the same plane as a wall, they were exposed to the elements. They were used mostly in courtyard by the end of the 19th century, as the one that you will see in the exhibition. So you can see here the shutters with a little aperture. And here again, the little aperture here. Also based on a detailed plan of a neoclassical house on Adriano 36 made by John Travlos. Here you have a plan, the house. A free 3D reconstruction of this house could be created. And here you will have an idea. You will see it on movement in the exhibition of the 3D reconstruction. The second purpose of this exhibition is to show the interaction between the archaeologists and the locals. Many workmen, about 100 to 150, were working for the dig, and tools and equipment of that period were bought and used by the archaeologists, like the tins, capacity measure, cardboard box, and even cigarette boxes were used for storage, as you will see in the exhibition. The technical staff was also local, and you will hear the testimony of the son of one of the potmender, Andreas Mavraganis, that you saw before earlier, who worked at the Agora until 1956. The Agora was a pioneer excavation for its time. It had a unique recording system. It was also one of the first excavations to use photography, creating an extraordinary amount of archival material collected by those who appear to have recognized the disappearance of a moment in the history of Athens. Here we have a collection of large format photographs mounted on cardboard, were typically printed for publication to show the progress of excavation. Additionally, more than 560 photographs were taken to represent the house before excavation. As you see here, the drawer of the house before excavation. And here you have an example. You see an example of one of the mounted files showing the progress of the excavation. And here one of the house. Beside this collection, each archaeologist or staff member capture images of the house before demolition, often using a lightweight Leica camera commonly employed during excavation for its convenience. They identify the house by their cadastre number or street number, and the photo were then pasted in their notebook, as you have an example here. These notebooks were labeled with a Greek letter representing each section as it was excavated. They serve as rare testimony of the neighborhood. The significant collection of photographs taken in the neighborhood amount to more than 1,000. This is without mentioning the immense archive of the excavation, comprising correspondence, draft of the law, proceeding of the evaluation committee, list of honor with their family number, the number of houses like this one, the numbers of rooms they occupy, and the profession they practice. The excavation was stopped during the World War II. The archaeologists came back in 1945 to complete the project, to settle an allocation for a museum and landscape the site. There, the restoration of the Stoa of Vatalos between 1953 and 1956. The archaeologists knew by then that the Agora hasn't been fully uncovered and that it was extending north beyond the railway line. In 1969, a strip of house located between the railway line and Adriano Street were expropriated, and in 1976, on the opposite side of Adriano, a large flour mill exposing an area that is still excavated today under the supervision of the American School. Here you have the east side of Adrianou. You are somewhere on Vrysaki Street with the ironmonger who has very cleverly used the space here, the train rack here, and then the Strabatalos, of course, and that Adrianou Street. And here you have the west side of Adrianou. The houses, you have the flour mill in the back. In the middle ground, the houses that were on the west side of Adrianou and where were discovered the royal stoa. And here you will see a panorama made by Jeff Vanderpool reconstructing all the houses on Adrianou with a plan to be followed and how it is today. So in addition to experiencing an immersive journey into the neighborhood, you will learn the reason for its disappearance and discover how it was like in the 19th century. Through archaeological research method, you will also uncover the site of the Agora and its unique role from antiquity to our modern democratic era. I hope you will enjoy visiting the exhibition as much as we enjoy putting it together. Thank you. I forgot to show you the excavation today. This is a flour mill today, so I jumped this side. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me tonight. I remember it was. Oh, thank you. Let me move on to the next slide. Maybe there we go. It's almost exactly 10 years ago where I walked into the storerooms of the Agora with my dear colleague Ann Steiner and one of my students. And we looked through the sliver of Adrianou Street that were excavated in 1969, and I had this wonderful day of working through Stella Grobel's, Stella Miller College, and Steve Miller's 1969 notebooks, accompanied by John Travelos's drawings of about 30 different properties that became the subject of a research topic from one of our students that never went beyond the classroom. So thank you for inviting me to come back. My talk today will be about, and I apologize for probably the single most uninteresting object in the entire Agora compared to all the other objects that you might be more interested in, the tin cans that Sylvie showed me exactly a year ago. And I want to apologize in advance for the preliminary nature of these thoughts that we'll offer today about the sort of this notion of an archaeology of petroleum. Archaeologists of the contemporary world have argued that the recent past presents unique theoretical and methodological challenges that we should call the archaeology of supermodernity. Revolutions in speed, energy, transportation, communication, war technologies, colonialism, and environmental degradation have created a temporality that collapses what once took centuries into decades. A unique feature of supermodernity, moreover, is the intentional dematerialization of human experience. If culture's role today is to make the machinations of capital, labor, energy, and now knowledge through AI invisible, the archaeologist is called in to rematerialize the world, inject an ethical prerogative, and perhaps empower resistance. I'll show you 3 foundational textbooks of this archaeological chapter of the Contemporary by Oxford from 2013, by Alfredo González Ruibal from 2018, better known for his excavations of sites of the Spanish Civil War, And closer to the American school, Bill Carher's Archaeology of America, published just a few months ago, Bill Carher being an important member of the Greek archaeological community. Petroleum, the one material that has transformed all life on Earth and now threatens its extinction, requires a new archaeology that can, for instance, capture the microplastics embedded in the tissues of your kidneys, your liver, or your brain at this very moment. Urban historian Carola Hein has proposed the notion of petroleum scape to characterize the liquid's penetration into 3 scales of experience in a feedback loop of production, distribution, and consumption. The success of Standard Oil as a new model of a super company hinged exactly on John Rockefeller's ability to integrate all 3 by 1904. Petroleum scape includes the upstream oil rigs of North Dakota that I've studied with a group that I might show you later, which in 2006 applied fracking technologies to an unprecedented scale, a technology with Greek-American roots, created by the son of a Greek shepherd from Nestani, Arcadia, who migrated to Galveston, Texas in 1901. Petroleum scape also includes tin cans, such as this one by Soconi, short for the Standard Oil Company of New York, that advertises its headquarters at 26 Broadway, where John Rockefeller commanded his empire. Designed in 1922, Rockefeller's palace was modeled on the mausoleum of Halicarnassus and was topped by an ancient cauldron lit by 4 kerosene lamps, extinguished in 1956. When we think of petroleum, Greece falls out of the picture as a mere cog in a wheel of larger geopolitical forces to which it played no part other than the victim. But then names like the Niarchos Foundation or the Onassis Foundation come to mind, and we're reminded that Ariston, Onassis' first oil tanker, was launched in 1937, right as the Rockefeller family financed the excavations of the Athenian Agora on the profits of the Standard Oil Empire. How does petroleum inflect our historiographic understanding of the Agora excavations? What are the similarities or differences with its sister petroleum projects, like the Rockefeller-funded restoration of colonial Williamsburg of 1926, or the Cloister Museum of Medieval Antiquities of 1930? We might also ask, how does it align with the cultural agenda of Rockefeller-funded University of Chicago and its signature but controversial core curriculum? Or with Rockefeller's Riverside Church on the west side of Manhattan, or Rockefeller Center in Midtown? Or with the ill-fated Archaeological Museum of Lesbos, designed by W. Stuart Thompson, that Natalia Bogakov-Porgan has so brilliantly analyzed in the archivist notebooks. Now, rest assured, I will not talk about historiography today. But these are questions that I think we need to begin considering from the position of 100 years later. When we look at the photograph of the first day of excavations on May 25, 1931, we may not see the automobiles that are zooming up and down Singru Avenue behind us, the petroleum in the newly paved asbestos roads, or the kerosene illuminating every house at night. But thanks to Sylvie Dumont's discerning examination of both the Vrysaki photographs and the Agora storerooms, we will start to see oil's footprint on the ubiquitous tin cans of downstream transport. Modernity arrived in Greece in 1821 with the foundation of the nation-state, but supermodernity arrived in the mid-20th century with mass urbanization into Athens, complete reliance on petroleum for heat and transportation, and a metapolitev sea that entangled Greece in the geopolitics of the Cold War, NATO, and an American sphere of influence in Technicolor glamour, as you see in this Mobile Oil Hellas map. Rebuilding Greece's roads, ports, and airfields became priority number 1 in 1947, so that buses and cars could mend the fractured countryside even at the time of civil war. Colonel Griffith of the Corps of Engineers supervised contractors from Minneapolis, from New York, from Los Angeles, and reported on the road system, the tunnels, the bridges, the airfields, and the clearing of the Corinth Canal. 9 paving plants, photographed here in Griffith's report, executed the work, reporting shortages in petroleum, a necessary ingredient in asphaltization. Greece's petroleum scape was completed by the year 1958, when the first oil refinery began its operations, or when Onassis controlled a large fleet of tankers, first converted U.S. Liberty ships, and then supertankers built at Sparrow Point's Baltimore. The Rockefeller Foundation continued to fund the Agora, most impressively with the reconstruction of the Stoa of Atlas in 1952 that we heard earlier. Little did John D. Rockefeller Jr. know that his American archaeologists were inadvertently creating a museum collection of tin cans produced by his father's business and displayed today for the first time within that space. And we have Sylvie to thank once again for a groundbreaking act of pulling the classical curtains off and spearheading the archaeology of contemporary petroleum in Greece. Historians of the Anthropocene separate the first industrial age of coal from the second industrial age of petroleum, which they call the age of great acceleration. 1826 saw the arrival of the first coal-powered warship, the Carteria, on which Samuel Howe served as medical doctor. In all its folkloric beauty, the prow of Carteria, displayed now in the National Museum, conceals the carbon footprint that it pioneered. In 1829, Howe founded the refugee colony of Washingtonia, which is the subject of our archaeological fieldwork here in Corinth this summer, which is the reason why I'm here, and remnants of which I show you in the red oval at the bottom right. And 1869, of course, saw the beginning of the railroad age, cutting through the Agora to Piraeus. Greece's transition from coal to oil began already in 1915, when the French army turned Thessaloniki into its center of oil logistics, and was complete by 1958, when crude oil from the Gulf states could be processed at Asproprios. Unfortunately, America played a leading role in the petrification of Greece. Undoubtedly, America played the leading role in the petrolification of Greece, leaving us with a positive heritage, like the little-known financing of a state-of-the-art hospital in Tripolis by the Greek-American oil entrepreneur William Hellis, still active today, or with some negative heritage, like the entanglements of Greek-American Tom Pappas of Esso Pappas Oil, no connection to the Zoe Pappas family, with the junta. So much needs to be done archaeologically to document this era, including historic vehicles like the Karnavalos, the rare 1954 bus preserved today in Navpaktos by a group of amateur historians, or the factory of its manufacturer, the Bouhajir Company in Patras, that began as a horse carriage shop in 1915 and transitioned into more automobiles in 1920. And I thank Nora Panzu, Professor of Cultural Heritage Management at the University of Patras and Associate Director of the Mount Lecaon Field School, for helping me on the Bouhazier research. You see a photo from 1920 on the left, and then Nora's photo from a couple months ago on the right. Petroleum scapes include the architectural infrastructure where automotive desires could be served. The most impressive such buildings is in Kolonaki at Kanari 3 from 1936. It featured 7 floors with elevators and a revolving turntable. Unlike the much more lovingly preserved the Liorgis neoclassical mansion next door, the Canaries petrol station has been rendered unrecognizable by later interventions. And forgive my Google Earth Street View. Perhaps the most successful case of petroleum scape conservation is the Panhellenion service station of 1958 at the main gateway of all car traffic from the Peloponnese over Athinon Avenue. In addition to gas, car wash, and engine service, the Panhellenion provided parking on its roof. The K-tail bus drivers from the Peloponnese would spend the night sleeping in their buses before heading back next morning. In 2019, the service station was lovingly restored, my third use of the word lovingly, and provides a unique museum-like experience replete with historic cafe and staff dressed in period clothing. Founded by Alexander Zekios as a Sakani vacuum petrol station in 1928, the Panhellenia was originally located on Piraeus Street on Platia Odiou, an area completely redeveloped in 1960 that looks something like this today. What you see on the photo from 1930 shows Zekios in front of the pump as he fills a 5-gallon tin container that is a very important part of our story. Note the corporate insignia, Soconi, or the Standard Oil Company of New York, one of the 15 companies that Standard Oil had to break into after the 1911 Supreme Court antitrust decision. Venzini Pratt, at the top right, refers to Charles Pratt, another Standard Oil subsidiary, better known as the founder of Pratt Institute in New York. Note also the prominence of Pegasus, the horse that Bellerophon captured in ancient Corinth, that Standard Oil adopted as its logo in 1934. Keeping the photo of Alexander Zekos in mind and remembering the tin can on which he rests his foot, we turn to Agora item IL 2305, marked by the same insignia. The can would have traveled 10 minutes from this station along the route, marked in blue, to find itself in a secondary usage at Vrysaki. The fabrication of tin cans was an important vehicle of distribution in the early petroleum industry. A 1916 photo from the Shell operations in Sumatra shows their manufacture. One of the central difficulties in the distribution of petroleum in developing markets was the shortage of tin cans because they were frequently recycled for other uses. This is precisely the situation with our agora tins, in this case used for the sale of butter. The original Shell embossed surface below the newer decal. I hope you can see the Shell imprint in the back. And here Sylvie Dumont has discovered that our ubiquitous oil cans may originate in oil cans of a different type. And this is far from unusual. A quote from Daniel Yergin's classic History of Petroleum, The Prize, the Epic Quest of Oil, Money, and Power, describing the situation of new markets, quote, all the trading houses in the Far East quickly established local factories to make the tin containers. Shell's bright and shiny red receptacles, fresh from the factory, were soon competing with Standard's blue ones, battered and chipped after the long voyage, halfway around the world. Perhaps some customers were buying kerosene more for the useful red can than for its contents. In any case, red roofs and red bird cages, as well as red opium cups, hibachis, tea stainers, and egg beaters began to replace the blue. And this is in 1892. The Marshall Plan of 1947 sealed the fate of Athens as a car city of the future, with capital investments in automobile infrastructure, asphalt streets, like submerging the Ilissos River. The age of the Great Acceleration, however, had already begun in the 1930s under four interrelated phenomena: the mass settlement of Asia Minor refugees, the development of suburban neighborhoods on the fringes, the availability of petroleum to fuel buses and automobiles, and concrete architecture. A photo of W. Stuart Thompson, chief architect of the American School, and the architect of the building next door, and his wife Gladys, who worked with the American Friends Refugee Relief, took a portrait here in 1928 in front of the Model A released by a Ford Motor Company just a year earlier. Georgios Theotokos, the most astute chronicler of Athenian modernity, reports on the Great Acceleration in his novel Argo, published in 1933. Quote, cars multiplied in amazing rates immediately after the Asia Minor catastrophe. Soon, the trees lining the boulevards had to be cut to widen their lanes. Fancy and loud new suburbs sprang in the most deserted corners of Attica that few Athenians had even visited, let alone knew their name. With its population almost doubled, the capital city changed face every day. Heavy houses were built everywhere with concrete. The map on the right and the list of neighborhoods on the left shows the expansion of these neighborhoods through 1930. Athens might have prided itself with the completion of a railway and a tram infrastructure of the first age of industrialization, but they served a very limited central spine. The new neighborhoods, developed in an ad hoc fashion, instead were served by some 20 individually owned private bus companies. This was an organic expansion and nimble system for urban growth that could not be planned, yet alone be financed by a central authority. The most heroic piece of Athenian petroleum scape was, of course, Singru Avenue, the asphalted 4-lane highway built in 1925 to 26 that captured the futuristic imagination. For instance, in George Safari's poem Singru Avenue 1930, dedicated to Theotokos, who he quotes, discovered it. He writes of the blackish river in the blackish river that stretches, stiffens, and goes away. When the Nearchos Foundation Cultural Center was constructed in 2016, the Euphoria of Piraeus excavated the layered history of Singru Avenue. They discovered the spectacular remains of a 7th century cemetery, studied here at the Winter Lab. Slightly less spectacular were the following find. The earliest remain of modern road asphalt. I thank Takis Karkanas for sharing with me this unpublished excavation, which begin an important chapter on the archaeology of the Greek Anthropocene. See, the, quote, asphalt remains are right below the, quote, backfill, below the hippodrome, built in 1925 and giving us an terminus antiquem. The earliest asphalt in Athens dates to 1904, the paving of Aeolus Street, but imported by the London Asphalt Company. In his 2022 study of entrepreneur Aristoboulos Zanos, historian Mike Pantelakis documents the foundation of the first native asphalt company in 1919 to serve the paving needs of the growing capital. Now that factory was in coastal Messenia. Oops, oh my gosh, there it is. We have located the remains of an industrial structure and the abandoned mine, now filled with water, and along with Nota Panzu, hope to serve it in just a couple of weeks when we make it down there. I will close with the most remarkable case of Greece's early petroleum scape in the ceremonial passage of the oil flame from Greece to the Berlin Olympics in 1936. Now, Karl Wiskott, chief of public relations in the German factories of Opel, you guys remember Opel? What is Opel? The German name for the American company Ford, orchestrated a photographic road trip across Greece that documented the journey in order to encourage the sale of Opels, but also to promote the nationalist socialist principles that he espoused as part of the rise of Hitler's Germany. Experiencing Greece by Car, whose second edition was published, in fact, during the German occupation of Greece, is an unsurpassable record of this 1930s roadscape. And this is from the photo publication. It both records the petroleum scape of 1936, but it also promotes a new reading of the Greek landscape from the futuristic and speedy promotion of the new technology. And here you see it's a fascinating story also because by the way, I should say that the Greek government made a great effort to pave those streets before 1936. And secondly, these are the girls that were involved in the reenactment of the lighting of the flame of Olympia that were given a ride kind of back after that ceremonial event. And here you see sort of some early attempts to map that journey and see in green you see the line of the first Anthropocene age in Greece, which is the rail line. And in red, you see the second age, which is the roads formalized or paved in the 1930s, and of course fixed and repaved by American contractors in the 1940s. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of a turn here for the remaining 10 minutes to show you a little bit of what does the archaeology of petroleum look like in a different context. And I will take you in an archaeological project in the oil fields of North Dakota that I showed you earlier. So what happens to archaeologists trained in Greece, trained in the Agora, trained in Corinth? In 2011, the misspelled Kosits Kourelis, who was a Gennadius Fellow in 1998, Bill Carher, Fellow in 2001, and Carpenter Fellow in 2007, and Richard Rothhaus, Gennadius Fellow in 1991, embarked on the documentation of the emergence of the petroleum scape of the fracking in North Dakota, which is characterized by the building of these man camps, these permanent houses in a completely undeveloped area. So we wanted to capture the moment of peak, and you can see kind of our published maps of those man camps, of those new cities. This is where we begin to explore the history of the back-end oil fields, including previous boom and bust cycles in North Dakota. Here's Nestani, the home of Mr. Mitchell. Mitchell, by the way, being the name of the paymaster in Galveston, Texas. And the documentation of these conditions, housing conditions in the freezing weather of North Dakota, these were essentially male workers that would come to the back end for about, for cycles of about 6 weeks. This is right after 2007, where most of the American workmen had lost their job because of the recession. They would work in the cycles and live in these in these types of RVs. Some of them very centralized, some of them very formal, and some of them very, very informal, like this one over here. So our project was, we can't capture the petroleum scape of Athens in 1936, but we can certainly do something about the petroleum landscape of the present. So to interview, document, record the placement of these communities, and also study them archaeologically. And here's some drawings of one of these RV camps. Here's a ground plan of the attempts of an American worker's family trying to create a sense of home up in the back end. So the reason why I bring this up as a point of comparison is to say that perhaps the time has come where we can think of the effects of petroleum and its settlement patterns more seriously. The Agora is absolutely an incredible case study because it had always been condemned from the very beginning of the nation state. As the von Klenze map showed, the plan was to always excavate it. And as a consequence, no rational entrepreneur would invest in a neighborhood that would be potentially torn down in 5, 10, 3, 20 years. So we have the situation of a kind of arrested moment in time. It becomes the slums of Athens, which is the reason why the Greek government just wants it, demolished. But as a consequence, because of the positive tradition of American archaeologists and the desire to record what they were destroying, we have the most incredible record of a community that's rarely represented, the working classes of the Athenian metropolis, as they're making things happen in the most limited ways, surrounded by the growth of the new roads, the new cars, the modernity of Theotokos and of Seferis. So we have this incredible opportunity to look at that slice of time in the people without history in some way, the underrepresented. And by doing these kind of comparisons between present and past, we might have sort of better leads in executing it. So very quickly, and I'll finish in just a couple of minutes, this is why the Vrysaki neighborhood was condemned. A vision by Leo von Klenze on what would happen once we actually could materialize the classical antiquity. And you can see in the von Klenze map of 1834, that area in the middle is left in its condition, because the plan is to tear it down as the new city evolves around it. And here you can compare here's the old city of 1834 right in the core that becomes Athens slums up until recently, as all these neighborhoods that I showed you earlier developed. Now these later neighborhoods are the ones that are fueled by the buses, by the cars, by modernity. Whereas the core of the city, where those that service those developing middle and upper classes are actually living in, including refugees, way before the Asia Minor catastrophe. I mean, one of the things that's fascinating about Plaka is that it was the place where you could get the cheapest rent because because everything was run down. This is a form of historic preservation that we can find in places like Charleston, South Carolina. It's kind of preservation by poverty, where you have no development because no one is interested, but you have the flip situation of a slice of a very delayed modernity so when we look at this slice, this sliver of Adrianou Street that Sylvie mentioned earlier, and the notebooks of Stella Keller-Miller and Steve Miller from 1969, right? And if we match them to those photographs, we get a very fascinating slice of the life of Vrysaki, in this case, as it was captured in 1969. And here I just want to finish up with our very kind of early attempt to reconstruct based on the evidence that Sylvie had made available to the world through her Vrysaki book, to get a little bit closer in contextualizing and relating almost archaeologically the signage, the material culture, and the architecture. So I want to show you these drawings that were done exactly 10 years ago and just stood in a drawer. And of course, with John Travlos's incredible interest in capturing that moment. And this is the house that now we can see in three-dimensional reconstruction. So there's a series of in spite of the long history or critique of American archaeology destroying a neighborhood, I would contend that we have a number of rare individuals along the entire narrative that are very much interested in capturing and remembering that moment, and we need to give them a certain, we need to give them credit for creating the richest urban archive of any city in the world. Arguably, those neighborhoods would have been torn down with polykatikias anyway, right? But they would have not been photographed, they would not have been captured. So in this, perhaps interesting bind of arrested development, poverty, excavation, we have this great body of material that for the first time in the history of Greece is being displayed for us in the Stoa of Atlas in the Agora. So anyway, I'll leave you with that image, and thank you very much for entertaining my early thoughts about petrol scapes.
I'd like to thank both Sylvie Dumont and Kostis Korelis for these presentations. And rather than take questions here, I invite you all to come see the exhibition and speak with our speakers and enjoy a glass of wine together. Again, thank you very much to all, and we see you over at the Makriani Swing.